The security camera captured it all, the moment Marcus Williams finally lost control. For 3 months, she'd been slipping through his fence, floating in his pool like she owned the place. But when he discovered the real reason, she kept coming back, the confrontation that followed would shatter everything. He thought he knew about justice, revenge, and the woman who'd been haunting his backyard. What started as simple trespassing became something far more dangerous. And the viral video that exposed the truth would leave millions questioning who the real victim was. The first time Marcus Williams found her in his pool, he thought he was hallucinating. On a Tuesday in late June, and he'd stepped onto his deck with his usual black coffee, expecting nothing more than the peaceful silence of his suburban sanctuary. Instead, he found a woman floating on her back in his crystal-clear water, arms spread wide like she was embracing the morning sun. She was maybe 30, with dark hair fanned out around her head like seaweed. Her eyes were closed, and she wore a simple black one-piece that had seen better days. For a moment, Marcus stood frozen, coffee mug halfway to his lips, wondering if stress from the divorce had finally pushed him over the edge. Then she opened her eyes. They stared at each other, across 20 feet of manicured lawn and chlorinated water. She didn't startle, didn't scramble for the edge in embarrassment. She just looked at him with these impossibly calm brown eyes, as if finding a strange man watching her was the most natural thing in the world. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, his voice cracking slightly. "This is private property." She blinked once, slowly, then rolled over and began swimming toward the shallow end with smooth, practiced strokes. When she reached the steps, she emerged from the water with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "Your gate was open," she said simply, wringing out her hair. "My gate is never open." "It was today." She walked to where a small pile of clothes sat folded on one of his lounge chairs, clothes he definitely hadn't noticed before. "Nice pool, by the way. Perfect temperature." Marcus set down his coffee with more force than necessary. "Look, lady, I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing, but you can't just—" "Elena," she interrupted, pulling a towel from seemingly nowhere. "My name's Elena Vasquez." "Elena, then. You can't just break into someone's backyard and go swimming. This is trespassing." Elena wrapped the towel around her shoulders and fixed him with that unnervingly direct gaze. "Are you going to call the police?" The question caught him off guard. There was no fear in her voice, no pleading or defensiveness, just mild curiosity as if she was asking about the weather. Yes. Maybe. I should. But you won't." She said it like a statement of fact. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. And they both knew it. He wasn't the type to call the cops on a woman who hadn't actually heard anything. Still, the presumption rankled. "This can't happen again," he said instead. Elena nodded, pulling on a faded pair of jeans over her wetsuit. "I understand." But even as she said it, Marcus caught something in her tone. Not defiance exactly, but a kind of quiet determination that made his stomach tighten with unease. She gathered her things with the same unhurried efficiency she'd shown throughout their entire interaction. When she reached the side gate that led to the street, she paused and looked back. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not calling the police." Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with his cooling coffee and a dozen unanswered questions. The second time, 3 days later, he was ready. Marcus had installed motion sensors around the pool area and changed the lock on the gate. He'd even trimmed back the hedge that ran along his property line, eliminating any potential hiding spots. When the sensors triggered his phone at 7:15 a.m. on Friday, he grabbed the baseball bat from his bedroom closet and headed outside. Elena was floating in the exact same spot, arms spread in that same peaceful surrender to the water. "Are you kidding me?" Marcus's voice echoed across the yard. "I changed the locks." She opened her eyes without any apparent surprise at his presence or the bat in his hands. "The sensor pad on your backsliding door is broken. You should get—" That fixed. Marcus glanced back at his house, mind racing. The sliding door faced the pool, but it was a good 30 feet from the fence. She would have had to cross his entire backyard in the dark, somehow disable his security system, and... How did you even know about the sensor? Elena rolled onto her stomach and began a lazy backstroke. I used to install security systems. Before. Before what? She didn't answer, just kept swimming. Marcus advanced to the edge of the pool, bat still in hand. This is harassment. I could have you arrested. Could, Elena agreed, flipping onto her back again, but won't. How can you be so sure? She stopped swimming and stood in the shallow end, water lapping around her waist. When she looked at him this time, Marcus saw something different in her eyes, not the calm detachment from before, but a bone-deep weariness that made his anger falter. Because you're not angry about the trespassing, she said quietly. You're angry about everything else, the divorce, the empty house, the fact that you built this perfect little paradise, and now you're the only one here to enjoy it? Marcus felt like she'd reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. You don't know anything about me? I know you haven't had anyone over since I started coming here. I know you eat the same breakfast every morning, black coffee and toast, and you read the news on your phone while sitting at that little table. She nodded toward his patio furniture. I know you work from home because your office light is on until almost midnight every night. And I know you're lonely enough that you'd rather argue with a stranger in your pool than call the police and be alone again. The words hit him like physical blows. Marcus gripped the bat tighter, but his arms felt heavy. Get out, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Elena studied his face for a long moment, then nodded and waded toward the steps. I'll try to come earlier next time, before you wake up. There won't be a next time. She paused, one foot on the bottom step. Marcus, it is Marcus, right? I saw your name on the mailbox. When he didn't respond, she continued. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm not taking anything that belongs to you. I just need this. For a little while. Need what? The pool? The peace. She climbed out of the water and Marcus noticed for the first time how thin she was, how her clothes hung loose on her frame. It's the only place I can float without sinking. Before he could ask what that meant, she was gone again, leaving him standing by his pool with a baseball bat and the uncomfortable feeling that he'd just lost an argument he didn't even know he was having. By the fourth incident, Marcus had given up on prevention and moved on to surveillance. He'd mounted a camera in the oak tree that overlooked the pool, angled to catch whoever was coming and going. The footage from the weekend showed Elena arriving at 6:30 a.m. sharp, somehow bypassing every security measure he'd put in place, like they didn't exist. She would swim for exactly 20 minutes, then leave, always pausing at the gate to look back toward the house. Marcus watched the recordings obsessively, studying her movements for clues about who she was and what she really wanted. But Elena gave nothing away. She swam with the mechanical precision of someone going through physical therapy, counting laps and resting at precise intervals. Sometimes she floated on her back for long minutes, staring up at the sky with an expression Marcus couldn't read. On Monday morning, he decided to take a different approach. Instead of confronting her, he sat at his patio table with his coffee and newspaper, making no effort to hide his presence. Elena noticed him immediately when she emerged from the pool, but she didn't rush to leave. Instead, she toweled off slowly, watching him with wary curiosity. "Permission to speak freely?" she asked. Marcus looked up from his paper. "It's my backyard. You can say whatever you want." "That's not how it works." "How what works?" Elena hesitated, wrapping her towel tighter around her shoulders. "Nothing. Never mind." She started to gather her things, but Marcus surprised himself by speaking up. "You said you used to install security systems." Her hand stilled on her clothes. "That's right. What do you do now?" Another long pause. Now I float in other people's pools and hope they don't call the police. Marcus set down his coffee. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. She finished dressing in silence, but when she reached the gate, she turned back. One more time. My daughter used to love swimming, she said suddenly. She was on the team at school, freestyle and butterfly. She could hold her breath for almost 2 minutes. Used to? Elena's hand tightened on the gate latch. Car accident. 3 months ago. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the knot of anger and frustration that had been building for weeks. Elena, But she was already gone, leaving him alone with his guilt and the sound of water lapping against the pool's edge. That afternoon, Marcus found himself researching Elena Vasquez online. The obituary was the first result. Sofia Vasquez, age 16, honor student and varsity swimmer, killed in a collision with a drunk driver on Highway 101. Survived by her mother, Elena Vasquez, formerly of Vasquez Home Security Systems. The business website was still live but hadn't been updated. As he stared at his phone screen, Marcus realized he was facing the most important decision of his life. The rational part of his mind insisted there had to be an explanation. Electrical accidents happened all the time. Young men attempting DIY, projects they didn't understand, often ended up hurt or worse. The timing could be coincidental. But Marcus had spent months watching Elena work with electrical systems. He'd seen her diagnose problems in minutes that would stump most professionals. He'd witnessed her methodical approach to every task, her obsession with safety protocols, her inability to cut corners, even on the smallest jobs. Elena Vasquez didn't make electrical mistakes, which meant Jeremy Castellanos' death was either an impossible coincidence or a perfectly executed murder. Marcus grabbed his keys. The Castellanos house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in a working-class neighborhood about 20 minutes from Marcus's place. Police tape still fluttered around the backyard, and a few neighbors lingered on their porches, drawn by the gravitational pull of tragedy. Marcus parked across the street and tried to look like he belonged. Through the chain-link fence, he could see the scene. A partially installed hot tub, scattered electrical equipment, and a dark scorch mark on the concrete where Jeremy Castellanos had died. "Terrible thing," said a voice behind him. Marcus turned to find an elderly woman in a pink housecoat, walking a small dog that seemed more interested in sniffing fire hydrants than tragedy. "You knew him?" Marcus asked. The woman, Mrs. Chen, she introduced herself, shook her head. "Not really. He only moved back in with his mother a few months ago, after his trouble with the law." "Trouble?" "DUI that killed some girl. Real shame." Mrs. Chen's tone suggested she wasn't entirely clear on which part was the real shame. "His mother, Patricia, she's devastated. First the jail time, now this." Marcus felt a stab of anger at the casual way she dismissed Sophia's death as Jeremy's. "Trouble?" But he kept his voice neutral. "Was he handy? The kind of person who'd install a hot tub himself?" Mrs. Chen laughed, a sound like rustling leaves. "Jeremy couldn't change a light bulb without help. That's why everyone's so surprised. Patricia kept asking why he didn't hire someone, especially after that nice lady offered to do it for free." Marcus's pulse spiked. "What lady?" "Oh, I didn't catch her name. Pretty thing, dark hair, said she was from some charity that helps families of people getting out of prison, offered to do electrical work at no charge, help Jeremy get his life back together." Mrs. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "Come to think of it, I haven't seen her since the accident." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Elena had found Jeremy Castellanos. She'd gained access to his home, probably by posing as some kind of social worker or charity representative. She'd offered to help with the hot tub installation, knowing that he'd jump at the chance for free professional work. And then she'd killed him. "Did you talk to this woman?" Marcus asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. just to say hello. She seemed sad, like she'd been through something terrible herself. Mrs. Chen tugged on her dog's leash. I suppose that's why she was volunteering. People who've suffered, they want to help others. If only you knew, Marcus thought grimly. After Mrs. Chen wandered off, Marcus stood staring at the backyard where Elena had taken her revenge. Part of him was horrified by what she'd done. Murder was murder, regardless of the justification. But another part of him, a part he didn't want to acknowledge, understood completely. The system had failed Elena in the most fundamental way possible. Her daughter's killer had walked free because of a technicality, smiling as he left the courthouse. What was Elena supposed to do? Accept that justice was a luxury she couldn't afford? Move on and let Jeremy Castellanos live the life Sophia would never have? Marcus tried to imagine himself in her position and found the exercise too painful to complete. If someone had killed his child and gotten away with it, he shook his head. This kind of thinking was dangerous. Elena had committed murder. Whatever her reasons, whatever the failures of the justice system, she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The question was, what was Marcus going to do about it? He drove home in a daze, Elena's empty coffee cup still sitting on his patio table like an accusation. For 3 hours, he paced his house, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the numbers that would connect him to police dispatch. Elena had trusted him. She'd shared her story, her grief, her daughter's memory. She'd found peace in his pool, safety in their friendship. And now he was considering betraying that trust because she'd done something he couldn't have imagined her capable of. But Jeremy Castellanos was dead. Someone had to be held accountable. As afternoon faded into evening, Marcus made his decision. He wouldn't call the police. Not yet. But he needed to understand what Elena had done and why. He needed to hear it from her directly. The problem was finding her. Marcus started with the hardware store, but Elena's manager confirmed she still hadn't shown up for work. Her apartment was dark, mail piling up in the box by the front door. He tried calling her cell phone every hour, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Elena, it's Marcus. I saw the news about Jeremy Castellanos. I think we need to talk. Elena, please call me back. Whatever's happening, we can figure it out together. Elena, I'm worried about you. Just let me know you're okay. By Thursday, Marcus was convinced she'd fled the state. Elena was smart, enough to know that Jeremy's death would be investigated, experienced enough with security systems to cover her tracks, and desperate enough to disappear if she thought she was in danger of being caught. Then, on Friday morning at exactly 6:30 a.m., he found her floating in his pool. Elena lay on her back in the exact spot where Marcus had first discovered her 3 months earlier, arms spread wide, eyes closed against the morning sun. For a moment, the sight was so familiar that Marcus almost convinced himself nothing had changed. Then Elena opened her eyes and looked at him, and Marcus saw the truth written across her face. She knew that he knew. "Morning, Marcus," she said quietly. "Coffee. Ready?" The casual greeting was so normal, so perfectly in keeping with their established routine, that Marcus felt momentarily disoriented. This was Elena, his friend, his morning companion, the woman who fixed his broken things and shared comfortable silences over coffee. But this was also Elena the murderer, who had electrocuted a man in his own backyard. "We need to talk," Marcus said. Elena floated for a moment longer, then swam to the shallow end with the same smooth strokes she'd always used. When she emerged from the pool, Marcus noticed details that had escaped him before. The way her hands trembled slightly as she toweled off, the dark circles under her eyes, the careful way she moved, as if she was holding herself together through sheer will. "I wondered when you'd figure it out," she said, wrapping her towel around her shoulders. "Elena, I'm not going to lie to you, Marcus. Not after everything." She sat down in her usual chair, but instead of relaxed familiarity, her posture was rigid with tension. "Jeremy Castellanos is dead because I killed him." Hearing her say it out loud hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd known, logically, but having it confirmed removed his last hope that he'd been wrong. "Why?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Because the system failed. Because justice is apparently optional when you're young and white, and your victim is just a 16-year-old girl whose mother doesn't matter to anyone important." Elena's voice was steady, but her hands were clenched in her lap. "Because he was going to go home and forget all about Sophia while I spend the rest of my life remembering. So you decided to be judge and jury." "I decided to be what the court system wasn't, effective." Elena looked at him directly, unflinching. "Jeremy Castellanos took my daughter's life and faced no meaningful consequences. So I gave him consequences." Marcus sat down across from her, struggling to reconcile the woman he'd grown to care about with the calculated killer she'd revealed herself to be. "How?" he asked. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at the coffee Marcus had forgotten to pour. "I researched him. Where he lived, what he did with his time, who he talked to. I found out his mother was having money problems, worried about how they'd afford to get the house ready for him to come home. So I showed up with a business card for a fake charity, offered free electrical work as part of a reintegration program." "And they bought it?" "People want to believe in second chances, Marcus. Especially mothers." Elena's voice carried a note of something that might have been regret. "Patricia Castellanos was so grateful. She cried when I offered to help. She kept talking about how Jeremy was going to turn his life around, how this was his chance to start fresh." Marcus felt sick. "You used a grieving mother's hope to get close to her son." "I used a grieving mother's hope to get justice for my daughter. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Elena, you murdered someone in cold blood. Premeditated." Elena's composure cracked slightly. "He murdered Sophia in cold blood, while drunk. That's not the same thing, and you know it." "You're right." Elena stood up abruptly, pacing to the edge of the pool. "What Jeremy did was worse. He killed an innocent girl because he was too selfish and stupid to call a cab. What I did was eliminate." 2 weeks later, his instinct proved correct when Detective Sarah Chen, Mrs. Chen's daughter-in-law, as it turned out, knocked on his door with questions about a certain charity worker who had been seen in the neighborhood around the time of Jeremy Castellanos' death. And suddenly, Marcus realized that choosing not to call the police was very different from keeping Elena's secret safe. Detective Chen was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 30s with sharp eyes and the kind of direct manner that suggested she didn't waste time on pleasantries. She stood on his front porch at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, badge in hand, looking like she'd already had several cups of coffee and solved at least one case before most people were awake. "Mr. Williams, I'm Detective Chen with the County Sheriff's Office. I was hoping you might have a few minutes to talk about the Jeremy Castellanos case." Marcus's coffee mug suddenly felt too heavy in his hands. "I'm sorry, but I don't know anyone by that name. He was the young man who died in an electrical accident 2 weeks ago. Lived about 20 minutes from here." Detective Chen consulted a small notebook. "We're following up on some leads, and your name came up in connection with electrical work and security systems." The lie came so smoothly that Marcus almost believed it himself. "I'm a graphic designer. I don't do electrical work." "No, but you've had some done recently. Several neighbors have mentioned seeing work trucks at your property over the past few months. Given that we're looking for someone with electrical expertise who may have been operating in the area, I thought you might have some information that could help." Marcus forced himself to take a slow sip of coffee, buying time to think. Elena had been careful about not leaving a trail, but she'd been working on his property for weeks. If the police were canvassing for electrical contractors, his house would definitely be on their list. "What kind of information are you looking for?" "Descriptions of workers, business names, anything that might help us track down someone who's been offering electrical services in the area." Detective Chen's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught the way her eyes swept over his property, taking in details. We have reason to believe Mr. Castellanos may have been approached by someone claiming to represent a charity or assistance program. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. That sounds like a scam. That's what we're thinking. Someone using a fake charity to gain access to vulnerable people, then maybe doing substandard work that leads to accidents. Detective Chen flipped a page in her notebook. Your neighbors mentioned a woman working on electrical projects around here. Dark hair, professional demeanor. Ring any bells? The moment of truth. Marcus could tell Detective Chen about Elena. Right now, describe her perfectly. Probably even provide her current address if he tried hard enough to remember the apartment building. One truthful sentence would solve the detective's case and send Elena to prison for the rest of her life. Instead, Marcus shook his head. I've had a few different contractors out here over the summer. Pool maintenance, sprinkler repair, that kind of thing. But I don't remember anyone matching that description. Detective Chen made a note. What about security system work? What about it? We found some sophisticated modifications to Mr. Castellanos' home security system. Disabled sensors, rerouted wiring, the kind of work that requires professional expertise. She looked up from her notebook. You mentioned having work trucks here. Any of them security-related? Marcus felt sweat gathering at the back of his neck despite the morning chill. I have a basic alarm system, but I haven't had any work done on it recently. It wasn't technically a lie. Elena had fixed his sensor pad months ago, long before Jeremy Castellanos died. But Marcus could feel the weight of the omission, the way it sat in his chest like a stone. Mr. Williams, I hope you understand that we're dealing with a potential homicide investigation here. If someone is using charity work as a cover to gain access to vulnerable people, they could strike again. The word homicide hit Marcus like a slap. Hearing it out loud, spoken by a police detective on his front porch, made Elena's crime feel real in a way it hadn't before. You think someone murdered Jeremy Castellanos? I think Jeremy Castellanos died in a way that doesn't make sense given his electrical experience, which was essentially zero. I think someone with professional expertise gained access to his home under false pretenses. And I think that same someone is probably still out there. Detective Chen closed her notebook and handed Marcus a business card. If you remember anything else, any details about contractors or repair work, please give me a call. Even something that seems insignificant could be important. After she left, Marcus stood in his doorway for a long time, staring at the card in his hand. Detective Sarah Chen, Homicide Division. Her phone number and email address printed in crisp black letters on official county stationery. Elena was wrong about the police investigation. They weren't dismissing Jeremy's death as an accident. They were actively hunting for his killer. And they were getting close. Marcus tried calling Elena immediately, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He left 3 increasingly urgent messages before giving up and driving to the hardware store where she worked. Elena called in sick again today, her manager explained, looking genuinely concerned. She's been out more than she's been in lately. To be honest, I'm starting to worry about her. From the hardware store, Marcus drove to Elena's apartment building. Her car wasn't in its usual spot, and when he knocked on her door, the sound echoed in a way that suggested the space beyond was empty. Elena had vanished again. But this time, Marcus wasn't sure if she was running from the investigation or planning something else entirely. He spent the rest of the day in a state of anxious uncertainty, jumping every time his phone rang, checking the news obsessively for reports of other mysterious accidents or deaths. By evening, he'd worked himself into such a state of paranoid exhaustion that he almost missed the soft knock on his back door. Elena stood on his deck, looking thinner and more haggard than he'd ever seen her. She wore dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes, and she kept glancing over her shoulder as if she expected to be followed. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. Marcus let her in, deadbolting the door behind her. "Where have you been?" "I've been trying to reach you all day, staying away from places the police might look." Elena accepted the coffee he offered but didn't sit down. Instead, she paced his kitchen like a caged animal. "A detective came by my apartment yesterday. I wasn't there, but my neighbor said someone was asking questions about charity work and electrical contractors. Detective Chen came here too, this morning." Elena stopped pacing. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. I said I didn't know anyone matching your description." Marcus studied Elena's face, trying to read her expression. "They know Jeremy was murdered, Elena. This isn't going away." "I know." Elena sat down heavily at his kitchen table. "I've been monitoring police communications. They've identified the security system modifications, traced some of the electrical components, even found witness statements about a charity worker in the neighborhood." "How are you monitoring police communications?" "Same way I used to research security vulnerabilities for clients. There are ways to access information if you know where to look." Elena's smile was grim. "The good news is they don't have a name. Yet, the bad news is they're systematically interviewing everyone in a 5-mile radius who's had electrical work done in the past 6 months. Marcus felt his stomach drop. "That includes me." "That includes you. And Detective Chen is smart. She's going to notice that you had electrical work done but claim you don't remember the contractor. She's going to dig deeper." "So what do we do?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup as if it held answers. "We have 2 choices. I can run, leave the state, change my identity, disappear completely. Or I can turn myself in. Those can't be the only options." "They are, Marcus. Because the third option, the one where I try to stay and fight this, ends with both of us in prison. You as an accessory, me for murder." Elena looked up at him with eyes that held a terrible kind of clarity. "I won't let that happen to you." Marcus leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the decision they faced. "If you run, what happens to your life here? Your job, your apartment, the pool where you've been finding peace? Gone. All of it." Elena's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the cost of that admission in her expression. "But at least you'll be safe. And if you turn yourself in, then I go to prison for the rest of my life. But you're probably clear. You can claim you suspected something but weren't sure, that you were planning to come forward when you had more evidence." Elena shrugged. "It's not perfect, but it might work." Marcus stood up and walked to the window overlooking his pool. The water was perfectly still in the evening light, reflecting the sky like a mirror. In a few hours, Elena should have been floating there, finding her brief escape from grief and guilt and the weight of what she'd done. "There's a third option," he said quietly. "Marcus, what if Detective Chen is right about Jeremy's death? Not making sense, but wrong about the reason?" Marcus turned back to face Elena. "What if someone else killed Jeremy Castellanos?" Elena frowned. Elena worked with the methodical precision of a surgeon, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she constructed an elaborate web of false evidence. Marcus watched over her shoulder, fascinated and horrified by the ease with which she fabricated documentation that could destroy an innocent man's life. "Work order dated 3 days before Jeremy's death," Elena explained, pulling up a perfectly crafted invoice on citywide electric letterhead. "Martin Rodriguez, senior electrician, contracted for hot tub installation and electrical panel upgrade. Payment terms, net 30 days. The document looked absolutely authentic, complete with job codes, permit numbers, and a supervisor's digital signature that Elena had somehow obtained from the company's database. "How did you—" "Corporate security is usually terrible," Elena said without looking up, "especially for small contractors. They spend all their money on equipment and none of it on cybersecurity." She opened another window, showing what appeared to be Jeremy Castellanos' phone records. 3 calls to Citywide Electric's main number in the week before his death. 2 to Martin Rodriguez's direct line. Marcus stared at the screen. You hacked the phone company? I spoofed the records. Much easier than actually hacking anything. Elena's tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were explaining how to change a light bulb. The key is making everything look normal from the outside while creating connections that will seem significant to investigators. She pulled up another screen, showing what appeared to be security camera footage from a home improvement store. The timestamp showed Jeremy Castellanos purchasing electrical supplies 2 days before his death, but Marcus noticed subtle digital artifacts around the edges of the image. Please tell me you didn't actually hack security cameras. I didn't hack anything. I created this footage using samples from publicly available sources. Elena's smile was grim. Amazing what you can do with the right software and a basic understanding of video compression. For the next 3 hours, Elena constructed a digital trail that painted a clear picture. Jeremy Castellanos had hired Martin Rodriguez to install a hot tub. The 2 men had spoken multiple times in the days before Jeremy's death, and Martin had been researching Jeremy's background, including his drunk driving history, in the weeks leading up to the fatal accident. The beautiful thing about modern investigations, Elena explained as she planted the fabricated evidence across multiple servers, is that police expect to find digital footprints. They're actually suspicious when there isn't enough electronic evidence. What about Martin's alibi? That's what makes this perfect. Martin was definitely in Sacramento when Jeremy died. Time cards, witnesses, hotel receipts, the works. So when the police find all this evidence connecting him to Jeremy, they'll assume he hired someone else to do the actual killing. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They'll think he hired a hitman? They'll think he hired a professional. Someone with electrical expertise who could make Jeremy's death look like an accident. Elena saved the last of the fabricated files and closed her laptop. And when they can't identify that professional, the case will stall out. But Martin will still be arrested. Martin will be questioned, maybe charged, but he'll never be convicted because he has an ironclad alibi. His lawyers will get the charges dropped, and he'll walk away with a story to tell at parties for the rest of his life. Elena's casual dismissal of Martin Rodriguez's suffering made Marcus uncomfortable, but he pushed the feeling aside. They were protecting themselves and, by extension, protecting justice. Jeremy Castellanos had deserved to die, and Elena had provided the justice that the legal system had failed to deliver. When do we plant the evidence? It's already planted. Phone records, work orders, security footage. It's all sitting in databases where the police will find it when they start digging deeper into Jeremy's background. Elena packed up her laptop with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. Now we wait. How long? Probably a week, maybe 2. Detective Chen seems thorough. She'll find the connections eventually. As Elena prepared to leave, Marcus found himself grappling with the magnitude of what they'd just done. They hadn't just covered up a murder. They'd actively framed an innocent man to save themselves. Elena, he said as she reached the door, are we the bad guys now? Elena paused, her hand on the doorknob. I don't know, Marcus. I've stopped trying to figure out who the good guys are in all this. But Martin Rodriguez will be fine. He has an alibi, good lawyers, and a union that will stand behind him. The worst thing that happens to him is a few months of legal hassles. Elena turned to face him directly. Jeremy Castellanos is dead, and the world is safer. For it. Sophia got justice even if it didn't come through official channels. And us? We get to live with what we've done, all of it. Elena's expression softened slightly. Marcus, I know this is hard. I know we've crossed lines we never thought we'd cross. But the alternative was letting Jeremy's killer, me, go to prison while he got to be remembered as a victim. After Elena left, Marcus tried to return to his normal routine, but everything felt different. His morning coffee tasted bitter. His work seemed meaningless. Even his pool, the sanctuary where Elena had found peace, looked like a crime scene. 3 days later, Detective Chen returned. This time, the detective looked tired but determined, like someone who'd been working long hours and was finally seeing results. She sat across from Marcus in his living room, notebook open, pen poised. "Mr. Williams, I want to thank you for your cooperation during our initial interview. Your information has been helpful in focusing our investigation." Marcus tried to look puzzled. "I'm not sure what information I provided. Sometimes it's what people don't remember that points us in the right direction." Detective Chen consulted her notes. "You mentioned having several contractors out to your property over the summer, but you couldn't remember anyone matching the description of our suspect." "That's right." "Well, we've identified our suspect. Her name is Elena Vasquez, and she's a former security systems installer who lost her daughter in a drunk driving accident." Detective Chen watched Marcus's face carefully. "The victim was killed by Jeremy Castellanos." Marcus felt his heart rate spike, but he forced his expression to remain neutral. "I see. What's interesting is that we've also uncovered evidence of another connection to Mr. Castellanos. It appears he hired an electrician named Martin Rodriguez to install a hot tub just days before his death." "Is that significant?" "Mr. Rodriguez's daughter was injured in a car accident caused by Jeremy Castellanos 2 years ago. So now we have 2 people with professional electrical knowledge and personal vendettas against our victim." Marcus struggled to keep his voice steady. "That seems like quite a coincidence." "That's what I thought. But the more we dig, the more connections we find." Detective Chen flipped to a new page. Phone records, work orders, even security footage of Jeremy purchasing electrical supplies. It's almost too neat. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Detective Chen sounded suspicious of the evidence they'd planted. "Too neat how?" "In my experience, real investigations are messy. Witnesses contradict each other. Documentation is incomplete. Digital records have gaps." Detective Chen closed her notebook and leaned back in her chair. "But in this case, every piece of evidence we find points in a clear direction. It's like someone wanted us to discover these connections." Marcus forced himself to shrug. "Maybe Jeremy Castellanos made more enemies than you originally thought." "Maybe. Or maybe someone very smart is trying to lead us away from the real killer." Detective Chen stood up, gathering her things. "Mr. Williams, I want to ask you one more time. Have you ever had any contact with Elena Vasquez?" This was the moment. Marcus could tell the truth, expose Elena, end this elaborate charade before it destroyed Martin Rodriguez's life. He could choose honesty over survival, justice over self-preservation. Instead, he looked Detective Chen directly in the eye and lied. "I've never heard that name before in my life." Detective Chen studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "I appreciate your time, Mr. Williams. If anything else comes to mind, please give me a call." After she left, Marcus sat in his empty house and tried to process what had just happened. Detective Chen suspected the evidence was fake, but she didn't seem to know how to prove it. Elena's plan was working, but barely. That evening, Elena returned looking more anxious than Marcus had ever seen her. "Detective Chen talked to you again," she said without preamble. "How do you know?" "Because she also talked to Martin Rodriguez today, and his lawyers, and his union representative." Elena sat down heavily. "Marcus, they arrested him." Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "What?" "Martin Rodriguez was arrested this afternoon on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder. They think he hired someone to kill Jeremy Castellanos." Elena's voice was flat, emotionless. "His bail hearing is tomorrow morning, but his alibi." His alibi proves he didn't personally kill Jeremy. It doesn't prove he didn't hire someone else to do it. Elena rubbed her temples. Detective Chen is smarter than I thought. She figured out that the evidence was too clean, but instead of dismissing it, she's using it to build a conspiracy case. Marcus stared at Elena, trying to process the magnitude of their mistake. The next morning, Elena arrived at exactly 6:30 a.m., not for a swim, but for coffee and the most important conversation of their lives. But as she walked through his gate for what they both knew would be the last time, Marcus's phone rang with news that would change everything they thought they knew about justice, truth, and the price of doing the right thing. "Mr. Williams, this is Detective Chen. I need you to turn on the news immediately." Marcus looked at Elena, who had frozen halfway across his deck, sensing something significant in his expression. "What channel?" "Any channel." "Martin Rodriguez held a press conference 20 minutes ago. He's confessing to conspiracy to commit murder." The words hit Marcus like ice water. "What?" "He's claiming he hired someone to kill Jeremy Castellanos. Says he planned the whole thing and wants to clear his conscience." Detective Chen's voice carried a mixture of exhaustion and frustration. "Mr. Williams, I need to ask you again. Are you absolutely certain you don't know Elena Vasquez?" Marcus looked at Elena, who was watching him with growing alarm. "I'm certain. Because Martin Rodriguez just described her perfectly. Said she approached him months ago claiming to be a victim's advocate, that she offered to help him get justice for his daughter's accident." Detective Chen paused. "He's giving us everything, Mr. Williams. Names, dates, payment methods. Either he's the most detailed liar I've ever encountered, or he's telling the truth." After Detective Chen hung up, Marcus and Elena sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just heard. "Turn on the news," Elena said quietly. The press conference was being broadcast live on every major network. Martin Rodriguez stood behind a podium outside his lawyer's office, flanked by his wife and daughter, the same daughter who'd been injured in Jeremy Castellanos' accident 2 years earlier. "I want to make a full confession," Martin was saying, his voice steady despite the obvious emotional toll. "I hired someone to kill Jeremy Castellanos. I planned it for months and I paid for it to be done." A reporter shouted a question about why he was confessing now. "Because I can't let an innocent person suffer for my choices," Martin replied. "The police arrested me yesterday, but they also have evidence pointing to another suspect, a woman who lost her own daughter to Jeremy's drunk driving. I won't let her be blamed for something I did." Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. "He's protecting you." Elena stared at the screen, her face pale. "But why? He doesn't even know me." On television, Martin Rodriguez continued his confession. "Jeremy Castellanos killed my daughter's friend. He put my little girl in the hospital. And when he got out of jail after only 4 months, I knew the system had failed. So I decided to provide my own justice." "Who did you hire?" Another reporter called out. "I can't reveal that. I won't put anyone else at risk. But I planned it, I paid for it, and I take full responsibility." Martin's lawyer stepped forward to end the press conference, but Martin waved him off. "There's something else you need to know," Martin said, looking directly into the cameras. "Jeremy Castellanos was planning to get his commercial driver's license. Even after killing a teenage girl while drunk, the state was going to let him drive trucks, delivery vehicles, maybe even school buses. How many more children would have died if he'd been allowed to keep driving?" The question hung in the air as reporters shouted follow-ups, but Martin Rodriguez had said what he came to say. He walked away from the podium with his family, leaving behind a media storm that would dominate headlines for weeks. Elena turned off the television and sat in silence for several minutes. "He's lying," she said finally. "Martin Rodriguez didn't hire anyone to kill Jeremy. He's confessing to a crime he didn't commit." "Why would he do that?" "Because he figured out what we did." Somehow he realized the evidence was planted to frame him, and instead of fighting it, he's taking responsibility to protect the real killer. Elena's voice was filled with wonder and horror. Marcus, he's sacrificing himself for someone he's never met. Marcus tried to wrap his head around the implications. But his confession doesn't make sense. If he hired someone who did, how did he pay them? The police will want details. Martin Rodriguez is a smart man with good lawyers. He'll give them just enough detail to seem credible without providing evidence that could be verified or disproven. Elena stood up and began pacing. He's buying time and taking heat off the real investigation. What about the evidence we planted? Now it looks like confirmation of his confession instead of a frame job. The phone calls, the work orders, it all supports his story that he hired someone to kill Jeremy. Elena stopped pacing and looked at Marcus. We accidentally created the perfect cover for his lie. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Martin Rodriguez's confession would probably end the investigation into Elena, but it would also destroy his life. An innocent man was going to prison for a crime he didn't commit, and there seemed to be no way to stop him without exposing Elena. We have to tell the truth, Marcus said. We can't let him do this. If we tell the truth, Martin goes to prison anyway, for obstruction of justice and false confession. Plus, I go to prison for murder, and you go to prison as an accessory. Elena sat back down, her expression grim. Martin Rodriguez has made a calculated decision to sacrifice himself. If we confess now, we're just adding more victims to Jeremy Castellanos' body count. But it's not right. Nothing about this situation is right, Marcus. Nothing has been right since Jeremy Castellanos got behind the wheel drunk and killed my daughter. Elena's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the weight of everything pressing down on her. The question is whether we honor Martin's sacrifice by staying free, or whether we compound the tragedy by destroying our lives too. They sat in silence as the morning heated up around them. Marcus found himself thinking about the chain of events that had led them to this moment. Elena's grief over Sophia's death, Jeremy's escape from justice, their decision to frame Martin Rodriguez, and now Martin's decision to protect Elena by confessing to a crime he didn't commit. Every choice had led to more complications, more victims, more injustice. What would Sophia want? Marcus asked quietly. Elena was quiet for a long time before answering. Sophia believed in doing the right thing even when it was hard, even when it hurt. She looked at Marcus with eyes that held months of accumulated pain. But I'm not sure what the right thing is anymore. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Check your email. Important information about Jeremy Castellanos' case. A friend. Marcus showed the message to Elena, who frowned. You don't recognize the number? Never seen it before. Marcus opened his email and found a message from the same unknown sender. The subject line read, The Real Story. The email contained a single video file and a brief message. This was recorded 3 days before Jeremy Castellanos died. Watch it before you decide what to do next. Marcus looked at Elena. Should we open it? At this point, what do we have to lose? The video file opened to show Jeremy Castellanos sitting in what appeared to be his living room, talking to someone off camera. The timestamp showed it had been recorded the Thursday before his death, 2 days after Elena had approached him about the hot tub installation. I don't understand why you're doing this, Jeremy was saying. I paid my debt to society. I served my time. 4 months, came a familiar voice from off camera. Elena's voice. You served 4 months for killing a 16-year-old honor student. Marcus felt his heart stop. Elena had recorded her conversation with Jeremy Castellanos. On screen, Jeremy shifted uncomfortably. Look, I'm sorry about what happened to your daughter, but it was an accident. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. You were drunk. You chose to get behind the wheel knowing you could kill someone. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. And some mistakes have consequences. Elena's voice was calm, almost conversational. Tell me about your commercial driver's license application. Jeremy's expression changed, becoming defensive. That's none of your business. Actually, it is my business. See, I've been researching your background, Jeremy. 3 previous DUI arrests, 2 accidents involving property damage, 1 hit and run that you were never charged with. Elena's voice got harder. And now you want to drive commercial vehicles, trucks, delivery vans, school buses. I have a right to make a living. You have a responsibility not to kill more children. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Elena methodically destroying Jeremy's justifications and excuses. But it was Jeremy's final statement that made Marcus's blood run cold. You know what? I'm glad your daughter is dead. 1 less teenage brat on the road. Maybe now she won't grow up to be a self-righteous bitch like her mother. The video ended with Elena's sharp intake of breath and the sound of a door slamming. Marcus stared at the blank screen, trying to process what he'd just witnessed. Elena, you recorded him saying that? Elena was crying, the first tears Marcus had ever seen her shed. I wanted to understand him. I wanted to know if he felt any remorse, any guilt about what he'd done. Her voice broke. Instead, I found out he was glad Sophia was dead. Why didn't you show me this before? Because it doesn't change anything. Jeremy Castellanos was a monster, but that doesn't justify murder. It doesn't make what?